For members of the 2S LGBTQ plus community, it's a big moment when you can live as your authentic self. However, around the world, some never have that chance. 70 countries have jurisdictions that criminalize private consensual same-sex sexual activity. In 8 countries, 2S LGBTQ plus individuals face the death penalty. Reaching Out Winnipeg, it's changing the lives of a small group of individuals, helping them start a new life here in Manitoba.
My name is Robert, and I'm a volunteer board director with Reaching Out Winnipeg. I'll probably use the acronym ROW later on, so that's what I'm referring to for Reaching Out Winnipeg. I'm volunteer director, have been for about 3-4 years now, and recently became the lead for community engagement and fundraising. Fundraising is obviously an important thing for an organization like ours, where we are financially supporting our landed refugees once they arrive in Winnipeg.
The most important question for our listeners: what is Reaching Out Winnipeg, or ROW?
So ROW's a small grassroots volunteer-based organization. We're very nimble, and so we're a small group of passionate people who both sponsor and settle LGBTQ refugees from other parts of the world to come to Winnipeg. What we like to say is that we make a big difference for a small number of people, because we are a small group, and we can talk more about this later, but at the end of the day, it's about $20,000 once a refugee arrives in Winnipeg that we're responsible for. So that money is for settlement purposes, not to actually sponsor them. So we work with the way that we will sponsor, and I'll describe the difference between a sponsorship and settlement, but sponsors actually to go through the arduous process of actually getting identifying a refugee, going through the various hoops that we need to go through with the federal government for perfectly fine purposes. And so that there's no cost involved with that. So we're not charging refugees a bunch of money to come here. I think you probably have heard those in the past, just as in other situations. It really is once they arrive here. So we're essentially responsible for them for a full year is what we do, financially, emotionally, mentally. And so that's really where the dollars that we are trying to raise. So the more dollars that we're able to raise means the more that we're able to settle once they arrive here in Winnipeg for that full year. And a year sounds like a lot of time just to be responsible for someone, but these individuals really they're coming from Middle Eastern countries, in most cases Africa, for example. English is sometimes there, sometimes not. Skill sets, what we say is that we're always life changing and quite often life saving. So these individuals have gone through a lot in their years living who they are, hiding for the most part in the countries where they're from. And so it's a year to get them settled, to find them a place to live, a safe place to live, maybe some secondary education as it relates to English as a second language, and getting them a job, because they need to be little birds that can fly away after a full year with us. And that's a lot to do in 1 year time.
All of us have learned that during this whole pandemic, it's been like 2.5, heading on to like 3-ish years. The time has flown by. Like a year means nothing anymore.
Yeah.
So I think when I was doing my research about different organizations here in Winnipeg, I saw yours and I'm like, yeah, like you mentioned, only a small group of people, but those you do help, it means the world for them. So what can you tell me about the history of ROW? When was it established and, why?
So 2012 is when it was established. And so in terms of why, I actually can't answer that question for you. But it was 2012, and I think it was a like-minded group of people who came together, and it was probably for a specific individual. Quite often, so there's 2 types of sponsorships. One is sponsorship through the federal government, and then there's private sponsorship. So we typically lean towards the former, the government sponsorship, because the time is really cut in half. A lot of things are pre-done by the federal government ahead of time before we're even brought into the process of it. And then there are actually some savings as well as it relates to our organization, because the federal government will actually give us some funding as well to help settle that individual. And so we tend to go for the government sponsorship, so we're able to help more people. But in that time of basically a decade now, Row, and I can only speak for the last 3 or 4 years that I've been involved, but basically there's only been about a dozen refugees that we've been able to sponsor. And we actually have 2 on the go right now that could be arriving anytime. And we don't really know. We usually get the email and within 2 weeks they could arrive. So we've been working on these 2 individuals, they're actually a couple, for like 2 years now, over 2 years. And obviously COVID has not been our friend, because we know that shut down a lot of borders as related to refugees, LGBTQ or not. And so we could get a phone call anytime, and within 2 weeks they could be here, which means it's go time for our settlement team, who basically are responsible for finding accommodations, starting the whole process of all the other services that we tap into that are already established here, like Immigrant Center and Need Center, and then start that whole journey for them for the next year.
A year you're helping out these individuals coming in. What does that process look like? You just mentioned, finding housing, a place for them to stay. What does that year all encompass a little bit more in detail?
Everything from like a bus pass or how to ride a bus to a library card to trying to find a circle of friends or building a circle of friends for them. We have actually a volunteer who is a therapist. So quite often there's some mental health needs, let's just say, finding that job. Everything really, it's going how to go grocery shopping, right? Like these individuals are not familiar with North American grocery stores, and even what their diet is or what they're used to. It's really everything. It's kind of like a brand new person. It's like if we were thrown right into the Middle East or Africa or somewhere else and say, here you go, welcome to your new life, right? It would be a little bit different for us. And that would be like where we're so fortunate and blessed in North America, is that we have not been running for our lives or hiding, who we are to our family or friends, because we're worried about we're worried about ourselves being murdered or killed. And so they're coming from such a horrible negative place, not only just from a new environment, but then also just from the fact of what they've been dealing with their entire life with where they were born.
It can be incredibly scary. Out here in Canada, we're so incredibly privileged. The queer community, of course, not to say there are instances where people have really bad upbringings, but the difference is astronomical.
There's still 8 countries in the world so we use the term SOGI, which is sexual orientation, gender identity minority. So it's kind of more of an inclusive, it's kind of like queer to a certain degree. It's more of an inclusive term of everyone within that range or that scope. But there's still 8 countries in the world where LGBT or SOGI people face a death penalty. So like these individuals and unfortunately, we're able to help very few, again, because of the fact that we are a small volunteer group organization, and there is a price tag that comes with being able to be responsible for them for a year. But I had the lovely pleasure to responding to the people that people from around the world that email us looking for help. And so I get to read, quite often they'll tell their story, right? And so these individuals are, sometimes they can work, but if they're found out to be SOGI, they're quite often fired. If their families find out that they are, there could be honor killings in some situations, or they're simply abandoned or pushed out of the house is the kind of the best scenario in a lot of the countries. And quite often they have to leave to other countries like Turkey and things, so they don't fear for their life as much. But so that's where they're actually a refugee from their country going to somewhere else before they arrive in Canada or in Winnipeg. So they're dealing with a lot of stuff. And yeah, so in North America, it's something actually with I think an opportunity for a lot of North American Pride festivities in the month of June for Pride as well, is I think there's an opportunity for those organizations to start thinking a little bit more globally. I have nothing against having inclusive washrooms in North America. I think that's an important thing for a lot of people. but there's a lot of our brothers and sisters out there in far worse situations. And so, for instance, in 8 countries still in the world, they can SOGI people, and SOGI is a term that we use, which is sexual orientation, gender identity minority. So kind of like a term, queer, it's all inclusive. So in 8 countries, SOGI people can face the death penalty still. In 72 countries, they can be legally punished by imprisonment, sometimes for life, public torture, and the people the individuals that are looking to for us to sponsor and come to Canada or come to really a Western culture, they are when they come out, well, they're hiding, number one. So when they come out, if they decide to do that, family is not a safe space in general. There's obviously exceptions to every rule, but there can be the best case scenario for a SOGI individual in many of the countries that we hear from or we sponsor is that they'll be kicked out of the house. In other cases, they're threatened with their life by their own family, and so they quite often will leave their home country and go somewhere, quote unquote, safer, like Turkey. However, it's no better. So if they actually get a job somewhere and they're found out to be SOGI, quite often they'll be fired, or they have to live, very much not part of society. And so they'll do odd jobs just to make do. So these are the individuals that are really, really tough places. And so when they come to us, again, as I was saying earlier, there's a lot of work that we need to do with them as it relates to just being a new culture. And so, some of these individuals, when they get here, and even like during Pride Month, it's something that's so foreign to them, right? Because they're not coming from a place of pride by any means.
They email you. What is the process between getting those emails, finding these individuals, and then working with the government to get them here?
Yeah. So unfortunately, the individual, I have a canned response for the individuals that just randomly email us. We can't help them. And it's sometimes because they usually put quite a bit of effort into telling their story. And so it can be very difficult and emotional. But we can't help them essentially. So we obviously give them resources, but if they found little old Reaching Out Winnipeg, right? I'm like, wow, they've done their research, because they've gone, there's larger organizations across Canada and also in the States as well. So part of our peer organizations. So they've done their due diligence to even find us. But unfortunately we can't. So when we go through a government sponsorship, the government basically gives us a bio. And when I say bio of individuals, when I say bio, there's basically 2 lines. You know very, 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 very little about these.
Oh yeah, you can't really learn anything about a person in like 2 sentences.
You can't learn anything, no. And so we basically, we get a handful of potential SOGI refugees, and that are given to us, and we get to pick from those. And we have a certain criteria that we use at Row, because we are a small group. Like if there's no English at all that they're able to speak, that's really difficult for us, right? We have to bring someone onto it as a member of Row, which we're not against doing by any means, who can speak that dialogue. So we typically have Englishes in there somewhere. We do look for a little bit for skill set. So we might hear like they drive a truck. We don't know if that means they can drive or they can drive a semi truck in North America, right? So it's kind of like a bit of a code that we have to go through. So to answer your question, though, we can't help individuals that just reach out to us, because if we have to go through the process, which is a good process that the federal government dictates. If we do a private sponsorship, it's a little bit more open. Sometimes there's like a personal connection. So we may have brought someone over originally, or another peer group has, and they are wanting to bring a friend of theirs as an example. And so there's situations there, or there might be a family member connection who now is here and they want to bring over their brother or their sister to Winnipeg. But for an individual just to randomly reach out to an organization like Row, there is such a process to immigrate as a refugee to Canada that we can't do anything for those individuals.
Mm-hmm. So they have to go through the federal government first, and then you can help them from there. Okay.
Which is very disheartening, obviously. And that's where we say we make a big difference with a small number of people. And it feels like it's a drop. It's a drop. It's literally a drop in the ocean. But I think for the motivation for the row members is the fact that it is still changing the life or saving the life of one individual. So we don't want to get we take pride in that, and we don't want to get frustrated the fact that we can do so little as it relates to a large group of the population around the world.
I just think it's interesting when you mentioned just 2 lines in a write up, a bio of this individual. Because when you go to adopt a pet, like there will be like a full on like
Yeah.
essay about them.
Yes.
What sort of reactions and things do you get from people you've been helping out over the year? Do they end up helping out the organization? And other means, do you stay in connection?
Yeah, we do for sure. So at the 365-day mark, we don't just say, see ya, good luck. Uh, so we sometimes do financially still support some of our individuals after that year mark. And then our settlement team, and it sounds so official, but it's a couple of guys, essentially, a couple of volunteers that have the ability to go on a bus trip, during the middle of the day, as opposed to work, that kind of stuff, and guide them and support them, have them over for like family birthdays and stuff like that. Really like adopt them in some cases as part of their family or their friend circle. Um, and so yeah, they're a part of the little road community, and then we try to encourage them to be part of the greater Soji Winnipeg community as well. Quite often they're a little bit younger, on the younger side, and so some of them will go back to school even after they've got like their English as a second language or additional language, I think the term is now, and then just trying to work and survive and go through the motions that they need to go through to have a brand new life. And then also sometimes to keep in touch with friends or family back home as well. So yeah, bring them into our homes essentially, and having them part of our chosen family is a big thing. In terms of sometimes we use them as like, the pinup person here, like help this person, kind of idea.
Yeah, of
But,
course.
but these individuals, keeping in mind, right, that they have not been able to be their true self their entire life. They feared for their life in many cases. And so, we try to get testimonials and quotes from them, that kind of stuff, to use like for our communications, to really put a person behind what we're trying to do, as opposed to just me, this white guy, this privileged white guy who volunteers. But it's tough. They may come to an event and participate in that way, but quite often that they're quite reserved to even like show their face, quite honestly.
Well, understandably. Well, it is good to hear that you're helping build a community with them, because that's something I've learned over the pandemic, the importance of community. And now that closures and everything are basically out the window and there are events and you see people come, there's some trepidation. And I think part of our major political turmoils right now is because a lot of people don't feel like they know their neighbors or have a community right now, which is so detrimental to us as a like human race.
And people get accustomed to it. They get used to thinking that's just that's the way that it can be, or that they can survive. And I know that the human beings are meant to be in relation. And so, but a couple of years of more isolation, people think that, oh, I'm fine doing this. And I don't think that's the case. I think it's gonna be detrimental moving forward for people. So no different for the individuals that we bring here as well. We have actually had a couple of couples that we've one, like I said, is on the way, and so that's a really neat experience. So I think when I was talking to the last couple, the fact that they're able to live together as a couple, and talk of and not hide the fact that they are in a romantic relationship, and that they're allowed to live that way, is something that they never thought could be.
For most queer people, that moment you're able to come out of the closet and be your authentic self is such an awe-inspiring moment for the individual.
Absolutely, yes, and do it, relatively safely. Yeah, something that we learned too, that I thought, because Winnipeg is such a diverse community with cultures from everywhere in the world, right? That the idea, well, they'll find community. So we'll build a Soji community for them, but we'll also, there's a community, background community here in terms of who they are, if it's Muslim or whatever have you. But what we learned many years ago is the fact that it sounds bad, but these are, this existing group of people that from their home country or their region aren't necessarily affirming. And so we had one situation where one of our sponsored individuals was in a community, and across the street was a family within their own culture, and he was very intimidated and wouldn't introduce himself or wouldn't engage with that family. And we're like, what is the problem? But right, that's the world that he comes from. His own people are against who he is, and so even though in Winnipeg or in Canada, North America, there's still that unease. And obviously, I don't want to paint a wide brush for all individuals. And I think probably people that do immigrate to Canada are probably now part of Western culture. But as we know, that there's still lots of homophobia around anywhere, right? Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, everywhere. So it's just an interesting thing, right? Because you would think that, oh, this individual's got a little bit of like some of his own people are here, but that's not always the case. So you sometimes are very much building a community and a chosen family for them.
There's an organization in Vancouver. It's called Pinoy Pride, and they work with Filipinos and other Southeast Asian communities. So they have the queer individuals, and then they have the older generations and their families. And what they do is they try to bridge the gap between them and have those conversations. Because the Philippines, very Catholic, very conservative, so it can be very hard. So being able to have those opportunities where people can just sit down and talk can mean a lot. Because, yeah, if you're separated from your heritage or your culture, it can be really hard. You just come here, then all of a sudden, it's the culture shock. You don't have anything else familiar, and if you do have the supports within individuals of your own background, it can mean all the difference.
Yeah. Even to the language barrier that I was referring to earlier, right? Like sometimes they know multiple languages, right? Like, and so, but English is not a strong one. And so we actually just had a welcome barbecue for someone that a spin-off organization of Rose had just brought someone over. And so we had a backyard barbecue for that individual, and he was using a translator on his phone, so he could speak and understand English enough to have a bit of a conversation, but there's so much slang, right? Slang and involved, and so he was using a translator, which is fine because he arrived in May, I believe it was, and so making sure that there's other people that we've sponsored at these events, and just so it's either at a barbecue or for just like on a random Tuesday, evening when you're talking about a job or a medical card or something like that, to have other people that have gone through that process or other people that can speak the language of them, it really helps. Because if any of us that listen to this have traveled to a country where they don't speak the native language, we know what that's like. So if that's your world now, it can obviously be very stressful.
Yeah, I guess it's been like a month or so now. Went to Montreal, and luckily a lot of people in Montreal still speak English, but there are times where it's like, where am I? What's going on here? Thank you so much for having this conversation with me, Robert. I felt it was so important, although Pride has come and gone, and we've seen a lot of corporations just all of a sudden, pull that rainbow and flag out of their window. But I feel it's important to have these conversations year-round. Like the 2S LGBTQ community, it's not something that just disappears after the month. And there are individuals across the world, like you mentioned, 8 countries where it's a death sentence, and many more where you're basically ostracized from any community. So having conversations about Pride, about these communities, working towards understanding and respect is what we need to do. Because the second you stop fighting for those things, look what we're seeing down in the United States, the conversations coming out that they want to remove the protections of same-sex marriage. Like, it can all too quickly disappear.
It can start very small, and then it can definitely snowball. And so the countries that we're bringing people from too, that there is none of that protection. So it really is, going back to, I don't know if in North America there were ever death sentences. for SOGI people. I don't believe so, but it's a lot of organizations are doing a lot of good work there. But I don't know. It's baked in for hundreds of years and many generations, and so changing a culture is not something that's obviously easy. It's not within our abilities. But trying to save as many people as we can and make a little bit of difference for them, I think is kind of what motivates the volunteers at Row.
Well, I mean, if we can make a small difference here, it can grow, and then maybe that positivity can influence the world. That's what I hope. That's what I'm clinging to.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the butterfly wing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, like one flap of butterfly wing, a hurricane across the globe, something like that.
Yeah.
So, where can people go to find out more about Row, and what are some ways they can help support your organization?
Yeah, so for individuals, so as I mentioned at the beginning, so I'm responsible for community engagement. So thank you, Ryan, as well as fundraising. And so we have kind of a couple of streams of fundraising that we're working on. So one is individual donations, and then one is corporate donations, both of which are difficult because there's lots of great organizations doing great work in Winnipeg. And so we're just one of those kind of waving our little SOGI flag saying, save the life of someone. So if an individual is watching or listening to this and they're so inclined, go to our website. You can make a one-time donation essentially. And then if you're a corporation, give me a call. Let's talk about what works for you. We do have some different packages in terms of fundraise or sponsorship. But just to kind of give a context to this too, because what I like to do when I talk about people giving dollars, it's not just giving money, and basically all of them, our fundraising goes to our allows us to sponsor an asylum seeker, and so we don't have overhead. Let's just say that, or we have to pay for our website subscription, once a year, but that's kind of it. So $20, what does $20 do, right? Well, that really buys groceries for a week for one of our asylum seekers. So $50 will get them what we need in Winnipeg: a toque, scarf, warm socks, and mitts, essentially. $100 buys them a monthly bus pass, which obviously is really important for an individual. And then $200 will buy them a safe place to live for a week. So, it's one thing to go, well, man, you need $20,000, Robert. Like, what am I? I don't have $20,000 to give you. Give me $20, and that's really gonna, if 10 people do that, then all of a sudden they've got groceries for 10 weeks. And so those are the little things that individuals can do. And then on the corporate level, kind of same idea there, that they can help as well from our model is that we financially support them for a year. So anything really helps as it relates to that. And the more that we get, the more that we'll be able to get additional asylum seekers to come here to Winnipeg.
Do you have a story you'd like us to share, or communities we should highlight? Leave a comment on our social media, or reach out to us on our website. I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk, and have yourself a good one.